A millionaire is accidentally kissed by an ugly beggar. He wants to kick her out, but something in that kiss leaves him speechless. Who is she really? What does she hide behind the dirt? The secret he uncovers later will shock the world. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The deafening noise of the loudspeakers at Chicago O'Hare International Airport barely drowned out the rapid pounding of Emily Thompson's heart. Her brown eyes frantically scanned every passing face as her hands clutched the phone displaying her brother Nathan's last message. "I need to sort some things out. Don't worry about me." 3 months without a word. 3 long months since. The family restaurant had closed its doors. The scent of freshly brewed coffee from a nearby cafe momentarily transported Emily back to the kitchen of family flavors. The restaurant that had been the heart of her existence for 3 generations. She could almost smell her grandmother's secret sauce, the one that brought customers back week after week, the one that carried stories of love and dedication in every ingredient. The sound of another plane taking off snapped her back to reality. An airport employee had mentioned seeing someone who looked a lot like Nathan boarding a flight to Chicago that morning. It was a flimsy lead, but it was all Emily had. After the restaurant was sold under mysterious circumstances, Nathan had started acting strange, making secretive calls, hiding notes he wouldn't share with anyone. Then she saw him, or thought she did. A tall man with the same broad shoulders as her brother, the same way of walking. Without a second thought, Emily ran toward him, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. The people around her blurred into the background as her focus narrowed. Driven by pure longing, she reached him, touched his shoulder, and when he turned, she pressed her lips to his. Time seemed to freeze. The kiss lasted only seconds before Emily pulled back, eyes flying open as she realized her mistake. It wasn't Nathan. It was a complete stranger staring at her with a mix of surprise and something else she couldn't decipher. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored dark suit, he had piercing green eyes that studied her with unsettling intensity. I'm so sorry," Emily stammered, her face burning with embarrassment. "I thought you were my brother." The man remained silent, adjusting his tie in a gesture that seemed more automatic than necessary. It was then Emily noticed the whispers around them, the phones pointed in their direction. Some faces showed recognition, not of her but of the man she'd just accidentally kissed. "You're Emily Thompson," he said finally, his deep, controlled voice cutting through the chaos. It wasn't a question. Her stomach twisted. How did he know her name? Before she could respond, he continued, "Your video of Grandma Mary's gnocchi recipe went viral last month. You have a rare gift for turning stories into flavors." The mention of the video, filmed days before the restaurant closed, sent a sharp pang through her chest. It had been her last attempt to save the family business, sharing her grandmother's Italian recipe online. The video had millions of views, but it wasn't enough to stop the inevitable. "Daniel Montgomery," he introduced himself, extending a business card that made Emily catch her breath. "CEO of the Montgomery Group, one of the largest corporate conglomerates in the country. We need to talk about a proposal." The subtle smile forming at the corner of his lips contrasted with his reputation as a cold, calculating businessman. Emily took the card with trembling fingers as soft music began playing over the airport speakers, announcing yet another flight departing for unknown destinations. Just like her life, which was about to take a completely unexpected turn. Aroma. Cafe, where Emily had worked as a waitress for the past 2 months, was nearly empty on that rainy Thursday night. Water droplets slid down the window, casting dancing shadows over the aged wooden tables. The scent of coffee mingled with the aroma of cinnamon wafting from the kitchen, where the chef was preparing the last batch of cookies for the day. Emily absently wiped down the counter, her mind still replaying the surreal encounter at the airport that morning. Daniel Montgomery's card weighed heavily in her pocket as if made of lead. The proposal he'd made before leaving for his meeting still echoed in her ears. "I want you to prepare an exclusive dinner at my penthouse this Saturday." The doorbell chimed, announcing another customer. Emily looked up, and her heart skipped. Their beat. Daniel Montgomery stood in the doorway, raindrops still glistening on his dark overcoat. His green eyes found hers immediately, as if he knew exactly where to look. "I thought I'd find you here," he said, walking to the counter with the same elegance he'd displayed at the airport. "You still haven't given me your answer about the dinner." Emily swallowed hard, aware of the chef's curious gaze from the kitchen window. "Mr. Montgomery, Daniel," he gently interrupted. "After what happened at the airport, I think we can skip the formalities." A faint blush colored Emily's cheeks as she remembered the accidental kiss. "Daniel," she corrected, "why me? There are renowned chefs. Who could prepare this dinner?" He sat on one of the counter stools, his fingers lightly drumming on the marble surface. "Because when I saw your video, I wasn't just watching a recipe being made. I saw passion, history, soul. And that's exactly what I need for this particular dinner." Emily hesitated. The rent was overdue, and her waitress salary barely covered her basic needs, not to mention the debts left behind by the sudden closure of her restaurant. But something in the way Daniel looked at her made her suspect there was more to this proposal than he was letting on. "How many people for the dinner?" she finally asked. 12. Important executives. I need to impress them not just with the food, but with a unique experience." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll pay 10 times the usual rate for a private chef." The number made Emily hold her breath. It would be enough to cover the bills and still leave some savings. But it wasn't just that. It was a chance to cook again, to create, to do what she loved. "I have a few conditions," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I need complete creative freedom over the menu, and I want to use some specific ingredients I can only find at the municipal market." An almost imperceptible smile touched Joseph's lips. "Granted, with one condition of my own, that you prepare your grandmother's gnocchi as the main course." The mention of the family recipe made Emily's heart tighten. That gnocchi carried memories of sunny Sundays, her grandmother's smile, the scent of fresh basil, and Nathan's laughter echoing through the kitchen of family flavors. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Joseph stood, adjusting his suit sleeves with meticulous care. "Let's just say I have a special interest in family stories and in second chances." He pulled another card from his pocket, this one with a handwritten address on the back. "Saturday at 4 p.m. to start preparations. My driver will pick you up." When he left the cafe, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. Emily held both cards in her hands, sensing she was about to embark on a journey far greater than a simple dinner. In her apron pocket, her phone buzzed with a notification. For a moment her heart raced, thinking it might be Nathan, but it was just a comment on her viral video. "Your recipes have the power to reconnect people." She didn't yet know just how true those words would prove to be. The dinner was in full swing, and Emily watched with satisfaction as murmurs of approval rippled across the elegantly set table. The 12 executives, all impeccably dressed, savored each bite of the gnocchi, as if rediscovering a long-lost treasure. The aroma of fresh herbs lingered in the air, mingling with the bouquet of the specially selected red wine. Joseph, seated at the head of the table, kept his eyes fixed on Emily whenever she emerged from the kitchen to present each new dish. There was something in his gaze that went beyond a host's satisfaction, a mix of curiosity and perhaps guilt. Sophia, on the other hand, had barely touched her food, preferring to swirl her wine glass while watching the other guests with an enigmatic smile. "Extraordinary," remarked one of the older executives, dabbing the corner of his mouth with a linen napkin. "It reminds me of a restaurant I used to dine at years ago. What was the name again?" "Family Flavors," Emily replied automatically, refilling his wine glass. The man's eyes widened in recognition. "Exactly. Such a shame it closed so suddenly. It was one of the best establishments in town." He paused, furrowing his brow. "I never quite understood what happened." Sophia cleared her throat discreetly. "Sometimes certain businesses must make way for progress, isn't that right, Daniel?" Emily froze mid-pour as she served the wine. There was something in Sophia's tone, a veiled insinuation that made her heart race. Daniel kept his expression neutral, but his fingers tightened slightly around his silverware. "Actually," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I've been looking into some of our recent real estate acquisitions. There are irregularities that need to be clarified." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Sophia set her wineglass down on the table with a dull thud. "This is neither the time nor the place for corporate discussions, dear brother." It was then that Emily noticed something odd. One of the younger executives seated near Sophia couldn't stop glancing at his phone. His hands trembled slightly, and beads of sweat glistened on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Excuse me," he said abruptly, staggering toward the restroom. Emily retreated to the kitchen, her mind racing. There was something familiar about that young man, something about his profile that reminded her of... Her thoughts were cut short by a scream from the hallway. The executive lay on the floor, pale and shaking. "He's having an allergic reaction," someone shouted. Emily rushed to his side, her heart pounding. "What dishes did you eat?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The appetizer," he managed between gasps. "The carpaccio." Emily felt her blood run cold. She hadn't prepared carpaccio. Her appetizer had been burrata with confit tomatoes. Daniel was already on the phone calling an ambulance, while Sophia watched the scene with an unreadable expression. The other guests crowded the hallway, whispering among themselves. "This is unacceptable," Sophia declared, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. "A chef who can't identify food allergies? The press is going to love this story." "I didn't." "Serve carpaccio," Emily protested, her voice trembling. "Someone must have switched the plates in the kitchen." Daniel stepped closer, his green eyes flashing with concern and understanding. "Emily's right. I need to check the security cameras immediately." As the ambulance took the executive, who was now stable, Emily remained in the kitchen, mentally replaying every detail of the evening. That's when she noticed it. Her phone, which she'd left on the counter, was a few inches out of place. Unlocking the screen, she found a message from an unknown number. "Not all poison comes from food. Some comes from smiles. Be careful." "Who you trust, sis?" Emily's heart nearly stopped. Only one person called her sis. But why was Nathan warning her? And why like this? As the turbulent night came to an end, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was sinking deeper into a mystery, far beyond a simple business dinner. The morning after the disastrous dinner, Emily woke to the insistent buzz of her small apartment's doorbell. Still groggy, she opened the door to find her best friend Claire, holding a folder with an urgent look on her face. "I saw the news," Claire said, stepping inside without ceremony. "But there's something you need to see." She opened her laptop on the kitchen table as Emily made coffee. "What news?" Emily asked, her stomach twisting. Claire turned the screen, revealing sensational headlines. "Amateur chef sabotages business dinner. Montgomery Group faces culinary scandal." The photos showed the ambulance leaving the building. "This is ridiculous," Emily protested, her hands shaking as she poured the coffee. "I didn't prepare that carpaccio. Someone—" "I know," Claire interrupted, "and I think I found out who might be behind it." She opened a video file. "I work in airport security, remember? I was reviewing old footage when I found this." The video showed Nathan, 3 months earlier, talking to a man in a quieter corridor of the airport. Emily immediately recognized, the other man, it was the executive who'd fallen ill the night before. "Peter Mendelsohn," Claire explained, zooming in. "Junior financial analyst at Montgomery Group, but with some interesting connections. He has regular meetings with people connected to a major real estate investor, Anthony Vasquez." Emily sat down, feeling her legs weaken. The same Vasquez who showed up out of nowhere offering to buy the restaurant's building. Exactly, and get this. Claire fast-forwarded the video, showing Nathan handing an envelope to Peter. "Your brother didn't run away, Emily. He's investigating something." The coffee cooled, forgotten in the cup as Emily processed the information. She remembered the mysterious message on her phone the night before. "Claire, I need to show you something." She grabbed her phone, but before she could open the message, there was a firm knock at the door. Daniel Montgomery stood in the hallway without his usual suit, wearing jeans and a casual shirt that made him seem almost human. His green eyes showed concern. "Can we talk?" he asked, then noticed Claire. "In private?" Claire stood up, gathering her things. "I'll call you later," she told Emily, throwing a meaningful glance at Daniel before leaving. Once they were alone, Daniel began pacing the small apartment. "The kitchen security cameras were disabled for exactly 7 minutes last night," he said, stopping in front of a photo of Emily with Nathan and their grandmother at the restaurant. "Just enough time for someone to switch the dishes." "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel turned to face her. "Because I found something about the sale of your restaurant. The holding company that made the acquisition is a subsidiary of the Montgomery Group, but the transaction was done through questionable documents." Emily felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" "Possibly forged signatures, manipulated appraisals." He stepped closer, his voice lowering, "and all the documents were processed by Sophia's office." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily walked to the window, watching the city waking up outside. The aroma of coffee, mixed with Daniel's subtle cologne, creating an oddly intimate atmosphere. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. "Because..." He paused, as if carefully choosing his words. "Because when I saw your video, it wasn't just the recipe that caught my attention. It was the ring you were wearing." Emily instinctively touched the ring on her finger, an antique piece her grandmother had given her before passing away. "What about it?" "It's identical to one my grandmother used to wear, a ring that disappeared 40 years ago, along with her set of important family documents." The distant sound of a siren cut through the morning air as Emily stared at the ring as if seeing it for the first time. Her grandmother had never told her the full story behind the jewel, only that it was a symbol of a love cut short. "Emily," Daniel said softly, "I think our families have more in common than we realized, and I suspect your brother figured it out before we did." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "The secret lies in the heat, where it all began. Look in the old pages, sis." Emily and Daniel exchanged glances. The mystery was only beginning to unfold, and every answer seemed to bring even more questions. The municipal market buzzed with life that Saturday afternoon. Emily walked between the stalls, breathing in the familiar scents of spices and fresh fruit. Daniel followed closely, looking oddly out of place among the lively vendors and haggling customers. "My mum used to bring me here every Saturday," Emily remarked, stopping at a spice stand. "After she left to find work abroad, Grandma kept the tradition alive." "And your father?" Daniel asked gently. "Never met him. Mom said he had to leave before I was born." Emily picked up a few sprigs of basil, the strong aroma bringing back memories of Sundays at the restaurant. Funny, she always got emotional when she talked about him, like it was an unfinished story. Daniel picked up a rosemary branch, twirling it between his fingers. "Sometimes the most important stories are the ones we can't finish." They continued walking until they reached a small imported goods shop tucked in a quieter corner of the market. The doorbell chimed as they entered, and an elderly woman looked up from an old recipe book. "Emily!" The woman, Rose, exclaimed, her Italian accent still strong after all these years in the US. "It's been so long, dear. And who is this handsome young man?" "Daniel Montgomery," he introduced himself. But before he could say more, Rose dropped the book she was holding. "Montgomery?" She looked from Daniel to Emily, her face paling slightly. "Like your grandfather?" It was Daniel's turn to be surprised. "You knew my grandfather?" Rose quickly recovered, bending down to pick up the book. "Chicago used to be a much smaller city, dear. Everyone in the culinary world knew each other." She turned to Emily. "Did you come for more of that Sicilian sauce your grandmother loved so much?" "Actually," Emily hesitated, "I'm looking for the family recipe book. Mom said she left a copy here with you." Rose's eyes sparkled with understanding. She disappeared into the back of the shop and returned with a leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed with age. "Your mother asked me to keep this until you came for it," Rose said, handing the book to Emily. "She said you'd know the right time." Emily carefully opened the notebook. The pages were filled with her grandmother's elegant handwriting, old recipes mixed with personal notes. But something was odd about some of the pages. Darker stains, as if they'd been exposed to some kind of heat. "The secret lies in the heat," Emily murmured, remembering Nathan's message. Daniel stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. "This reminds me of something my grandfather used to do," he remarked. "He'd use thermochromic ink to hide important messages in seemingly ordinary documents." Emily's heart raced. "Miss Rose, may I use your oven for a moment?" The elderly woman nodded, a mysterious smile on her lips. "Of course, dear. Sometimes we need a little heat to reveal long-hidden truths." In the small kitchen at the back of the shop, Emily turned on the oven. As they waited for it to heat up, she continued flipping through the book. Among the traditional recipes, she found an old photo, two families gathered in front of a newly opened restaurant. Her heart nearly stopped when she recognized the faces. "Daniel, look at this," she whispered, showing him the photo. "It's our grandparents, together." In the Harsita time-yellowed image, the patriarchs of the Montgomery and Thompson families stood side by side smiling, their wives holding a banner that read, "Family Flavors, Grand Opening." In the background, partially visible, was the same ring Emily now wore. The oven beeped, signaling it had reached the right temperature. Carefully, Emily held one of the stained pages near the heat. Slowly, words began to appear, written in ink that only revealed itself under warmth. Coordinates, bank account numbers, and a message that made them both hold their breath. The true legacy lies not just in the flavors, but in the union of two families torn apart by others' greed. The original will is where it all began, protected by the symbol of our promise. Daniel and Emily exchanged glances. The mystery of the restaurant, Nathan's disappearance, Sophia's behavior, it was all starting to make sense. But before they could discuss further, Emily's phone buzzed with a new message. "Vasquez is on the move. Watch out for the snake who bears the Montgomery name. Find the safe before she does." The basement of the old family Flavors was practically untouched, despite 3 months of abandonment. Emily held a flashlight as she descended the creaking wooden stairs, with Daniel close behind. The scent of spices still lingered in the air, mingling with the distinct aroma of aged wines resting on dusty shelves. "My grandmother kept everything. Down here," Emily explained, illuminating the exposed brick walls. "Every bottle, every rare spice, every—" She stopped abruptly, the flashlight beam focusing on a specific spot on the wall. "What is it?" Daniel stepped closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against hers. "What, that mark?" Emily ran her fingers over a nearly imperceptible carving in the wall. "I never noticed it before, but—" She raised her hand, comparing the design of the ring on her finger to the mark on the wall. It was identical. Daniel pulled a small device from his pocket, scanning the area. "It's a hollow space," he murmured. "There's something behind these bricks." Working together, they carefully began removing the loose bricks. Emily's heart pounded harder as the cavity was revealed. Inside, they found an old metal box, its surface weathered by time. "The ring," Daniel whispered. "It must be the key." With trembling hands, Emily removed the ring and fitted it into a small opening on the side of the box. The ancient mechanism groaned, but worked. Inside, they found yellowed documents and a cassette tape. "We need to get out of here," Daniel said. Suddenly, his body tense. "Now." Emily was about to protest when she heard voices coming from upstairs. Quickly, they stashed the documents in a bag and headed for the back exit. When they reached the alley, they saw a dark car parked at the restaurant's entrance. "Sophia," Daniel muttered, pulling Emily behind a dumpster. How did she know? They waited in silence until the car drove away, then sprinted to Daniel's vehicle parked a few blocks ahead. Inside the car, Emily finally breathed a sigh of relief, clutching her purse to her chest. "My apartment isn't safe," she said. "Sophia knows where I live." "Let's go to my beach house," Daniel suggested, starting the car. "It's discreet, and I have equipment there to listen to that tape." As they drove along the Anchieta highway, the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose. Emily examined the documents they'd found, her mind racing to connect the pieces of the puzzle. "Look at this," she said, showing one of the papers to Daniel. It was a partnership contract dated 40 years ago between the Montgomery and Thompson families. The restaurant was a joint venture between our grandparents, and here, Daniel pointed to a specific clause keeping one hand on the wheel. It says the property could never be sold without the unanimous consent of both families. But then, how did Sophia manage to... Emily's phone buzzed with a new message. "The documents you found are just the beginning. The real story is on the tape. Be careful who you trust. Not all the Montgomerys are what they seem." Daniel glanced at the message out of the corner of his eye. "Nathan's helping us, but why hasn't he shown up?" "He must have his reasons," Emily replied, watching the ocean come into view between the hills. "Just like you have yours for helping me." Daniel fell silent for a moment, his fingers tightening slightly on the wheel. "When my grandfather passed," he began, choosing his words carefully, "he left me a letter. Said his biggest regret was not keeping a promise he made to his best friend. At the time, I didn't understand. Now I realize some stories need to be set right," he finished, turning onto a private road that led to a modern, beachfront house, "and some promises deserve a second chance." As they parked, Emily noticed a light on the porch. Daniel immediately tensed. "I didn't leave any lights on." Before they could decide what to do, a familiar figure emerged from the darkness. Claire, Emily's friend from the airport, stood on the porch, holding a laptop. "You took your time," she said, her face serious. "You need... Let us see this. I found something in the old restaurant recordings that'll change everything you think you know about your families." The sound of waves crashing on the shore served as a backdrop as Claire connected her laptop to an old projector. On the wall of the beach house living room, grainy images began to appear. Security footage from Family Flavors, dated 3 months ago. "How did you get this?" Emily asked, seated on the couch next to Daniel. "Your brother," Claire replied, adjusting the image. "Nathan came to me before he disappeared. He asked me to keep these files and only show them when it was safe." In the recording, Sophia appeared entering the restaurant after closing hours, accompanied by Anthony Vasquez and 2 men in suits. The audio quality was poor, but the words were clear enough. "The original will was never filed," Sophia said, her voice echoing in the empty restaurant. "If we secure the property before anyone finds out..." "What about the boy?" Vasquez asked. "He knows too much." "Nathan has no proof," Sophia replied with a cold smile. "Besides, I have plans for him." Emily felt her stomach twist. Daniel placed a hand over hers, a silent gesture of support. Claire paused the video. "There's more. I found records of suspicious bank transfers. Sophia has been planning this for months, using shell companies to hide the money trail." "But why?" Emily questioned. "Why go to such lengths for a restaurant?" Daniel stood up, walking to the window. The moon reflected on the choppy sea, creating silver patterns on the dark water. "It's not about the restaurant," he finally said. "It's about what it represents." He picked up the cassette tape found in the basement and inserted it into an old player on the shelf. His grandfather's raspy voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, Daniel, it means the time has come for the truth. Family Flavors isn't just a restaurant. It's the symbol of a promise made between 2 families. A promise that goes beyond business. Anthony Thompson wasn't just my partner, he was my best friend. Together, we discovered something that could change Chicago's real estate market. Something Sophia and Vasquez must never find out." The recording was cut off by a sharp noise. Emily jumped from the couch. "Someone's here." The lights in the house flickered and went out. In the darkness, footsteps echoed on the porch. Claire quickly unplugged her laptop and stashed it in her bag. "Through the back door," Daniel whispered, grabbing the documents and the tape. "I have a boat anchored at the pier." They had barely reached the kitchen when the front door swung open. The beam of flashlights cut through the dark. Emily felt Daniel grip her hand, guiding her through the house he knew so well. They made it to the pier unseen. The boat swayed gently on the dark water. Just as they were about to board, a noise caught Emily's attention. Turning, she spotted a familiar figure in the shadows. "Peter," she whispered, recognizing the young executive from dinner. "Sorry about the scare earlier," he murmured, stepping into view. "It was the only way to pass along the message without raising suspicion. Nathan sent this for you." He handed Emily a flash drive and vanished quickly into the trees. On the boat, as Daniel steered them away from shore, Claire plugged the drive into her laptop. It was a video from Nathan. "Sis, if you're seeing this, you found the documents. What Sophia and Vasquez want isn't the restaurant. It's what's beneath it. Our grandfather and Daniel's grandfather discovered something during construction. Something Sophia wants to use for a much bigger plan. Trust no one except Daniel and Claire. I'll reach out when I can. Love you." Emily gazed at the dark horizon, where the city lights were barely visible. The boat cut smoothly through the water, carrying them away from immediate danger, but drawing them closer to the heart of a mystery spanning generations. "Where are we going?" Claire asked, shutting the laptop. Daniel adjusted the boat's course, his eyes fixed on a distant point. "The one place Sophia would never think to look for us, the Thompsons' old summer house." A chill ran down Emily's spine. She hadn't been there since childhood, back when her grandmother was still alive. But something told her they'd find more pieces of the puzzle tying their families together. The Thompsons' old summer house emerged from the foliage like a ghost from the past. Dawn painted the sky pink as Daniel docked the boat at a small private pier, partially hidden by a bend in the shoreline. The two-story building, with its stone walls and faded blue windows, seemed frozen in time. Emily felt her heart tighten as she climbed the creaky wooden steps beneath her feet. Memories of happy summers with her family flooded her mind, the smell of fresh bread in the morning, Nathan's laughter echoing through the garden, her grandmother singing Italian songs while cooking. "My grandmother used to bring us here every summer," she explained, searching for the spare key in the flower pot still sitting by the door. "Until one day she just stopped. I never understood why." Daniel watched everything with interest, his green eyes taking in every detail. "This architecture, it's identical to my grandfather's country house." "Impossible," Emily replied, finally finding the key. "This house was built by my great-grandfather. In 1945, Daniel finished, by the same Italian architect who built my family's estate." Claire, who was right behind them carrying her laptop, furrowed her brow. "Our families were closer than we thought." The interior of the house was dusty but surprisingly preserved. Furniture covered with white sheets stood like silent sentinels. Emily walked to the kitchen, her favorite place in the house. The large, wood-burning stove, the solid wooden shelves, the massive Italian marble countertop. Everything remained exactly as she remembered. "Look at this," Claire called, removing one of the sheets. An old china cabinet was revealed, its shelves filled with framed photos. In one, two young women smiled at the camera, arms around each other in front of family flavors. "That's my mother," Emily whispered, touching the dusty glass. "And the one next to her." "My mother," Daniel finished, his voice thick with emotion. "They were friends." Before Emily could answer, a noise from upstairs caught the group's attention. The three froze. Claire quickly turned off the flashlight she was holding. "Someone's here," Daniel whispered, instinctively stepping in front of Emily. Footsteps slowly descended the stairs. Emily held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. A figure emerged from the shadows and Emily nearly screamed. "Mom?" Margaret Thompson stood on the last step of the staircase, her grey hair framed by the soft dawn light streaming through the window. Her eyes, identical to Emily's, were glistening. "I knew you'd come," she said softly. "When I heard about the restaurant closing, when Nathan started digging, I knew sooner or later you'd find your way here." Daniel took a step forward. "Mrs. Thompson," Margaret interrupted him with a sad smile. "Daniel Montgomery, you look just like your father." She moved closer, lightly touching his face. The same green eyes as Beatrice. "You knew my mother?" Margaret walked to the china cabinet, picking up the photo they had been looking at moments before. "Beatrice was my best friend. We were inseparable, just as our parents had been, until... She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. Until what, Mum? Emily asked, stepping closer. Until we discovered the truth about the restaurant's land, about what had been built there decades earlier. Your father, Emily. Margaret looked straight at Daniel, was Beatrice's brother. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Emily felt the world spin. Daniel staggered slightly, bracing himself against the wall. But that means, Claire began, that your cousins, Margaret finished, and that the empire Sophia has protected so fiercely was built on a lie that tore apart not just business, partners, but an entire family. Margaret walked to an old chest in the corner of the room, opening it with a key she wore around her neck. From inside, she pulled out a red leather book very similar to the one Emily had found with Rose. It's time for you to learn the true story of the Montgomery and Thompson families, and, most importantly, she opened the book, revealing pages filled with notes and diagrams. It's time you understood why that land is worth far more than anyone realizes. The sun was already high when Margaret finished brewing coffee in the old kitchen. The familiar aroma of freshly ground beans filled, the air mingling with the scent of sea breeze drifting through the open windows. Emily watched her mother move with the same grace as always, as if the years of absence had never existed. During the construction of family flavors, Margaret began, pouring coffee into antique porcelain cups, our grandparents discovered something extraordinary. The land sat atop one of Chicago's largest underground aquifers with a unique mineral composition. She opened the red book on the kitchen table, revealing detailed maps and chemical analyses. The water had special properties, and they began secretly using it in all the restaurant's recipes. That's why the flavor was so unique, Emily murmured, recalling her grandmother's words about the secret ingredient no one could figure out. More than that, Daniel interjected, examining the documents. This mineral composition, according to these reports, it has significant medicinal properties. Claire, who was typing furiously on her laptop, looked up. I found records of an old pharmaceutical company that operated near the restaurant in the 50s. They were researching mineral waters. Vasquez found out about the aquifer, Margaret continued, her voice trembling slightly. And when he learned Sophia was willing to do anything to increase the Montgomery Group's power, they teamed up, Daniel finished, his jaw tight. Sophia never accepted being the adopted sister. She wanted to prove her worth to the Montgomery family by any means necessary. A noise from the garden made everyone jump. Emily rushed to the window, her heart racing as she saw a familiar figure crossing the overgrown lawn. Nathan, she shouted, running to the back door. Her brother looked different, thinner, with deep shadows under his eyes, but his gaze burned with the same determination. As always, Emily hugged him tightly, feeling tears stream down her face. Sorry for disappearing, sis, he whispered, but I needed to gather all the evidence. Nathan stepped into the kitchen, greeting everyone with tense nods. When he saw Margaret, he paused for a moment, then pulled her into a long embrace. When they separated, he pulled a flash drive from his pocket. I got access to the Montgomery Group's main servers, he explained, plugging the device into Claire's laptop. Sophia and Vasquez are planning to build a pharmaceutical complex on the restaurant's land. They already have international buyers interested in the aquifer's water. But that would destroy the entire region's water table, Daniel protested, his voice thick with outrage. Exactly, Nathan agreed, and it would erase any trace of our family's true history. Margaret walked to the window, gazing at the distant sea. Beatrice found out about Sophia's plans weeks before she passed. She was gathering the courage to confront her sister. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Daniel's mother had died in a mysterious car accident 15 years ago. Or maybe not so mysterious after all. We have to stop them, Emily declared, her voice firm, not just for the restaurant or the aquifer, but for all the families torn apart by this greed. Daniel nodded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. Cousin or not, there was something between them that went beyond blood ties. Nathan is organizing a presentation for investors tomorrow night, Nathan informed them. She'll reveal the plans for the land, It's our chance to expose everything. Claire looked up from her laptop. I got access to the Montgomery Group's security cameras, and you won't believe what I found in the old files. She turned the screen, showing a recording from 20 years ago. In it, Sophia was speaking with a man in her office. The audio was corrupted, but the auto-generated subtitles revealed words like will, replacement, and accident. That man is Bernard Dupont, Margaret explained, her voice trembling. He was the lawyer who handled Daniel's grandfather's will, and he mysteriously disappeared 2 weeks after this recording. The sound of waves crashing on the shore seemed louder now, as if nature itself was responding to the tension in the air. Emily glanced at the ring on her finger, the symbol of a promise made decades ago. Tomorrow night, she finally said, we're rewriting this story, and this time, we'll make sure it has the right ending. The group began planning every detail as the sun continued its journey across the sky. In the old kitchen, where so many memories had been made, a new story was taking shape, one of redemption, justice, and above all, bonds that neither time nor greed could fully break. The Montgomery mansion was bustling that morning. Staff rushed back and forth, preparing for the big event that evening. Emily watched the commotion from inside the main kitchen, where she'd gained access thanks to Daniel, who introduced her as the chef in charge of the buffet. Guests start. Arriving at 8, Daniel explained, showing the schedule on his tablet. Sophia scheduled the presentation for 9. We have to act before then. Emily nodded as she sorted ingredients. Her hands moved automatically, preparing the appetizers that would serve as cover for their real mission. Claire, disguised as a kitchen assistant, typed discreetly on her phone. The security cameras are under our control, she whispered. Nathan got full access to the system. The plan was risky, but it had to work. While Emily and her team served the guests, Daniel would conduct a quiet investigation in Sophia's office, searching for the original documents she kept hidden. Nathan, posing as security, would monitor Vasquez's movements. Are you sure you want to do this? Daniel asked Emily when they were alone for a moment. His green eyes showed genuine concern. Emily stopped chopping the herbs and turned to him. It's not just about the restaurant or the aquifer, she replied softly. It's about all the lies, all the families torn apart. Here it's about your mother, Daniel, about everything Sophia took from us. He stepped closer, lightly touching her face. The fact that they were cousins seemed insignificant compared to the feelings growing between them. Promise me you'll be careful. Sophia is more dangerous than we think. Oh, what a touching scene, a sharp voice interrupted the moment. Sophia stood in the kitchen doorway, her icy blue eyes cold as steel. The Montgomery air and the little viral chef, almost like a fairy tale. Emily felt Daniel tense beside her, but kept her composure. Mrs. Montgomery, I was just finalizing. Tonight's menu. Sophia approached, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. She picked up one of the basil leaves Emily had just chopped, rubbing it between her fingers. You know, dear, I've always wondered why that restaurant had such a special flavor. Emily's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. Family recipes, Mrs. Montgomery. Some things can't be bought. No, Sophia smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But they can be taken, just like that land was taken from your family. Daniel stepped forward. Sophia, don't worry, little brother, she cut him off. I just came to make sure our chef understands the importance of tonight. After all, we have very important investors arriving. It would be a shame if something went wrong with the buffet, wouldn't it? The threat was crystal clear. Sophia left the kitchen as quietly as she had entered, leaving a trail of tension in the air. She knows, Emily whispered, as soon as she was sure Sophia was out of earshot. Somehow, she knows. No, Daniel replied, checking his phone. She suspects, but she isn't certain, and that's what we'll use to our advantage. A message from Nathan flashed on the screen. Vasquez is here, brought extra security, be careful. Emily turned her attention back to the herbs, but her mind raced furiously. The scent of freshly chopped basil reminded her of her grandmother, the restaurant, and all the stories that needed to be preserved. Daniel, she called before he could leave the kitchen. Remember what my grandmother always said about family recipes. He stopped and turned, that the secret isn't in the ingredients, but in the stories they carry. Exactly, Emily smiled, a plan forming in her mind. And tonight, we're going to serve Sophia a story she never expected to taste. Outside the kitchen, preparations for the event continued. Waiters rehearsed their routes, florists adjusted the final arrangements, and security swept every corner of the property. No one noticed the discreet figure of Margaret Thompson slipping in through the back, carrying an old wooden box with the symbol of the two families carved into its lid. The night promised to be memorable, not for the reasons Sophia had planned, but for something far deeper, the revelation of a truth buried for decades, about to resurface with the flavor of justice. The grand hall of the Montgomery mansion shimmered under the glow of dozens of crystal chandeliers. Executives in tuxedos, influential businessmen, and prominent politicians mingled, their champagne glasses clinking in shallow toasts. Emily watched it all from the kitchen through the swinging doors as she put the finishing touches on the dishes to be served. "Are the documents safe?" she asked Claire, who had just returned from a discreet patrol. "Margaret stashed everything in the agreed spot," Claire confirmed, adjusting her waitress uniform. "Nathan is stationed near the sound system, just waiting for the signal." Emily nodded, her heart pounding beneath her chef's coat. The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. Every dish she had prepared carried not just carefully chosen flavors, but also a specific message. Daniel appeared in the kitchen, sharp in his dark suit. "Sophia is about to start her presentation," he murmured. Vasquez brought representatives from 3 international pharmaceutical companies. "Then it's now." Emily took a deep breath, picking up the first special dish. It was a seemingly simple starter, artisanal burrata served on a bed of fresh herbs. "Are you sure about this?" Daniel asked, his intense green eyes filled with concern. Emily smiled, touching the ring on her finger. "Some recipes are meant to reveal truths, aren't they?" The waiters began circulating with the appetizers. Emily had carefully selected each ingredient. The herbs came from the same supplier that stocked family flavors. The burrata was made using a special recipe from her grandmother, and the olive oil. The olive oil was the key. Sophia stepped onto the small makeshift stage, her imposing figure clad in a blood-red dress. "Dear guests," her melodious voice echoed through the hall, "tonight marks the beginning of a new era for the Montgomery Group." As she spoke, the guests savored the appetizer. Emily noticed the exact moment the unique flavor hit their palates. They were the same aromas, the same flavors that had made family flavors famous. "As you can see in the projections," Sophia continued, gesturing to the screens displaying impressive charts, "the project we present today will revolutionize the Brazilian pharmaceutical market." It was then that the first murmur of recognition swept through the room. An elderly gentleman, whom Emily recognized as a former customer of the restaurant, slowly rose to his feet. "This flavor," he said, his voice choked. "It's impossible. It's the Santos family recipe." Sophia hesitated for a moment, but quickly recovered. "Ah yes, our chef tonight is a talented professional who—" "No," another voice rose. "This is the taste of family flavors. The restaurant you shut down." The murmurs grew louder. Emily discreetly signaled to Nathan, who activated the sound system. The deep voice of Daniel's grandfather filled the room. "The aquifer beneath the restaurant isn't just a water source. It's the legacy of 2 families, a promise of unity that transcends business. Sophia, my adopted daughter, never understood. That true value lies not in what we can take, but in what we can share." Sophia paled, her eyes frantically searching for the source of the sound. Vasquez abruptly stood, signaling to his security, but Nathan had already blocked the strategic exits. Daniel stepped onto the stage, taking the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, what my sister failed to mention is that the land she intends to exploit holds a history, a story of 2 families united by something far more precious than money." Emily emerged from the kitchen carrying the main course, Grandma Mary's gnocchi, the recipe that had gone viral online. The familiar aroma filled the hall, bringing tears to the eyes of many present. This flavor, she said, her voice clear and firm, doesn't come from the ingredients alone. It comes from the aquifer that Sophia intends to destroy. The same water that made every dish at Family Flavors unique. The same water that two families swore to protect. Margaret emerged from among the guests, carrying the red book and the original documents. The same water, she added, that my best friend, Beatrice Montgomery, tried to protect before her suspicious accident. The ensuing chaos was controlled, but decisive. As Sophia struggled to maintain her composure, the investors began discreetly withdrawing. Vasquez was blocked from leaving by Nathan and other guards loyal to Daniel, and at the center of it all, the aroma of Grandma Mary's gnocchi lingered in the air like a silent witness to a long-buried truth. The grand hall of the Montgomery mansion had turned into a silent battlefield. Sophia, still on stage, maintained an artificial calm, but her eyes betrayed her fury. Vasquez, surrounded by guards loyal to Daniel, looked like a cornered beast. The few remaining guests watched, the scene with a mix of fascination and horror. "You don't understand," Sophia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Everything I did was for the good of the Montgomery Group, to preserve our legacy." "What legacy, Sophia?" Daniel asked, his voice heavy with sorrow and indignation. "A legacy of lies, of forged documents, of suspicious accidents?" Emily stepped closer to the stage, still wearing her chef's uniform. "The real legacy lies in the flavors that bring people together, not the fortunes that tear them apart." Claire appeared among the guests, her laptop open. "I have records here of all the suspicious transactions from the last 20 years. Offshore transfers, bribes, altered documents." "And this," Nathan emerged from the shadows, holding an old file, "is the original report from the investigation into Beatrice Montgomery's accident, the one you ordered buried, Sophia." Sophia's face drained of color. Her eyes frantically searched for Vasquez, who was subtly trying to reach his phone. "Don't even think about it," Margaret said, stepping toward him. "The police are already on their way. All the evidence has been sent to the proper authorities." Then Sophia did something unexpected. She laughed, a cold, calculated laugh that echoed through the hall. "You really think some old evidence can stop me? The Montgomery Group has enough influence to—" "Not this time, Mrs. Montgomery." The deep, authoritative voice cut through the air. An elderly man made his way through the guests. Emily recognized him immediately. It was Judge Mendelsohn, a regular at the old restaurant. "The evidence isn't just old," he continued, his imposing presence silencing the room. "It's consistent and devastating, and more importantly, it's in the right hands." Sophia swayed slightly, steadying herself against the podium. Her eyes met Daniel's, and for the first time, there was something different in them: fear. "Why?" Daniel asked, his voice softer. "Why go this far?" "Because I was never really a Montgomery," Sophia burst out, tears of anger streaking her perfectly made-up face. "I was always the outsider, the adopted one, the one who had to prove her worth. When I found out about the aquifer, about its potential, I finally had something that could make me indispensable to the family." "But you were already family," Daniel replied sadly. "Our parents loved you as their own." "Love?" Sophia laughed bitterly. "Love doesn't buy power, little brother, and power was all I needed to—" A commotion at the entrance of the hall interrupted her. Federal officers entered discreetly, accompanied by investigators. Vasquez made one last dash toward the back exit, but was restrained. Emily watched everything with a mix of sorrow and relief. The scent of gnocchi still lingered in the air, mingling with the tension. Her grandmother always said some recipes had the power to reveal long-hidden truths. Margaret approached Sophia, who now looked as though she'd aged 10 years in minutes. "Beatrice tried to help you, you know. That night before the accident, she went looking for you. She wanted to tell you the truth about the will, about how our parents planned to reunite the families." Sophia lifted her eyes, a shadow of recognition crossing her face. "The envelope, the one she had in the car. It held the truth you tried so hard to bury," Margaret finished. "That real power isn't in possession, it's in sharing." As the officers discreetly escorted Sophia and Vasquez out of the hall, Emily felt Daniel's hand find hers. The ring on her finger shimmered under the chandelier lights, as if blessing this moment of union. "You know what's ironic?" she whispered to him. In the end, it was the taste of truth that brought justice. Nathan stepped closer to the couple, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And now? What happens to the restaurant? To the aquifer?" Daniel smiled for the first time that evening. "I think it's time we honored the promise our grandparents made, to reunite what should never have been torn apart." Judge Mendelsohn, who had been watching the scene, raised his glass in a silent toast. Around him, the few remaining guests began to realize they had witnessed not just a corporate scandal, but the rebirth of a story of love, family, and tradition that refused to be forgotten. A week after the events at the Montgomery mansion, Emily was back in the kitchen of Family Flavors. The restaurant was still closed, covered in tarps and scaffolding, but the kitchen had been the first area restored. The scent of fresh paint mingled with the aroma of herbs and sauces simmering on the stove. The architects said the structural renovations will take 3 months, Daniel remarked, walking into the kitchen with a stack of blueprints under his arm. "But we managed to preserve all the original elements, including access to the aquifer." Emily smiled, adjusting the old embroidered apron her grandmother had given her. "And the social project?" "Claire is finalizing the paperwork for the culinary school," Nathan replied, emerging from the basement with a box of vintage wines. "The vocational training center already has a waiting list of students." The new vision for Family Flavors went far beyond just a restaurant. It would be a culinary hub with social responsibility, offering vocational training for underprivileged youth and preserving the aquifer sustainably. Margaret entered the kitchen carrying a pot of fresh basil. Rose just called. She said she found a few more old recipe books in the basement of her shop. "And Sophia?" Emily asked softly, noticing how Daniel tensed at the mention of his sister's name. "She accepted the plea deal," he replied after a moment. "She'll cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. The important thing is that the aquifer is protected now, registered as a historical and environmental landmark of the city." Emily walked over to the stove, where the tomato sauce bubbled gently. It was her grandmother's recipe, made with the special water from the aquifer. The familiar aroma filled the kitchen, bringing tears to Margaret's eyes. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said, hugging her daughter. "Just as Beatrice would be proud of you, Daniel." Nathan, scrolling through his phone, let out an excited exclamation. "Look at this! Daniel's video about the restaurant reopening already has over 1 million views." Claire, who had just arrived, smiled. "And the comments are incredible. People sharing memories of the old restaurant, family, stories, recipes passed down through generation. That's what Family Flavors has always stood for," Emily reflected, tasting the sauce with a wooden spoon. "It's not just about food, it's about connections, memories, stories that need to be preserved and shared." Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist as she cooked. The ring on her finger, now with new meaning, gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. "You know," he murmured in her ear, "I found something interesting in the old documents. The restaurant's original name, when our grandparents opened it, was United Flavors." Emily smiled, turning in his arms. "Maybe it's time to return to our roots." "With a few updates," Nathan added, showing the blueprints for the new design. The historic facade would be preserved, but the interior would be expanded to accommodate the culinary school and a small museum telling the family's stories. Margaret watched with teary eyes, remembering summers at the beach house, the laughter shared with Beatrice, the dreams that had seemed lost but were now reborn through their children. "There's one thing I haven't shown you yet," she said, pulling an old envelope from her bag. "I found it at the beach house, tucked inside the pages of the red book. It was an old photograph, yellowed with time. In it, 2 young mothers held their babies, Emily and Daniel, while their husbands smiled beside them. In the background, Family Flavors shone on its opening day. We were all one family," Margaret whispered, "and now, finally, we are again." The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows, casting golden patterns on the newly restored floor. The aroma of Tomato sauce mingled with the scent of fresh basil and the promise of new beginnings. Outside, pedestrians paused to watch the renovation, eager for the reopening of a place that had been more than a restaurant. It had been a gathering spot for stories, love, and flavors that stood the test of time. The Chicago autumn painted the streets in golden hues as United Flavors opened its doors for a special event. 3 months of intense renovations had transformed the place, preserving its historic essence while embracing a new purpose. A line of guests stretched down the sidewalk, people eager to rediscover the flavors that had marked so many memories. Among them were longtime customers, neighborhood residents, and, most importantly, the first students of the social culinary school. Emily stood in the main kitchen, now a spacious, modern space that retained original elements like the old, wood-fired stove. She wore a crisp white chef's uniform, with United Flavors embroidered in blue, the colors that united the Montgomery and Thompson families. "The first guests are coming in," Nathan announced, adjusting his tie. As the administrative director of the social project, he had taken on the mission of turning the restaurant into a hub of opportunity. Claire, coordinating the tech team, made final adjustments to the system monitoring sustainable aquifer use. "The class scheduling app already has over 1,000 sign-ups," she said with a smile. Daniel walked into the kitchen, sharp in his dark suit. Their eyes immediately met Emily's, conveying all the love and pride they felt for each other. "There's someone special who wants to see you," he said softly. Emily nearly dropped the spoon she was holding when she saw who walked in. Sophia, accompanied by correctional officers. Part of her plea deal allowed supervised visits on special occasions. "You did it," Sophia said, her voice stripped of its former arrogance. 3 months in confinement had changed not just her appearance, but something deeper. "You turned this place into exactly what it should have been from the start." "We did it," Emily corrected gently, "and there's still room for more reconciliation." Margaret, who had been watching the scene, stepped closer to Sophia. "Beatrice always said you had the best palate in the family. She'd be happy to know the restaurant has brought people together again." Silent tears streamed down Sophia's face. I'm sorry for everything." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Rose, the elderly Italian woman from the imported goods store. She carried an old package. "Emily, dear, I found this hidden among the old things in the shop. I think now is the right time." It was a photo album, its yellowed pages preserving memories of 4 generations. Pictures of the first family flavors, grandparents working side by side, families united in celebration. And on the last page, a sealed letter. Daniel approached as Emily opened the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting was her grandmother's. "My dearest, if you're reading this letter, it means you've finally found your way back to each other. The true treasure of family flavors was never the aquifer beneath its foundation, but the love that flowed through it." The ring Emily now wears isn't just a jewel, it's a symbol of a promise made between 2 families who chose love over any fortune. May this place remain a safe harbor for all who seek not just nourishment for the body, but for the soul. With all my love, Grandma Mary. The aroma of fresh bread began to fill the kitchen. The first batch of the new United Flavors was ready. It was the traditional recipe, made with the special water from the aquifer, carrying in every bite stories of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. "It's time," Nathan called. The first guests were already seated in the main dining room, where old photographs blended with modern decor. Emily looked around the kitchen, at her mother, who had finally found peace, at Daniel, who had proven that love transcends blood, at Sophia beginning her journey of redemption, at Nathan and Claire, who had helped rebuild not just a restaurant, but a legacy. "Today we're serving more than food," she said, adjusting her apron. "We're serving hope." And so, under Chicago's golden sky, United Flavors began a new chapter in its history. A story that proved sometimes the most important ingredients in a recipe aren't the ones we can see or touch, but the ones we feel in our hearts. 6 months after reopening, United Flavors had become more than a restaurant. It was a symbol of transformation in the heart of Chicago. The social culinary school was graduating its first class, young talents who had learned not just cooking techniques, but also the value of preserving stories through flavors. On a special Sunday afternoon, Emily was overseeing her students' practical lesson. Grandma Mary's gnocchi, now part of the official curriculum, was being prepared by eager young hands. The familiar aroma filled the school kitchen, mingling with laughter and lively conversation. "Chef Emily," called Maria, one of the students, "is it true this recipe helped solve a mystery?" Emily smiled, adjusting the oven temperature. Actually, it wasn't the recipe itself, but the love and truth it carried. Daniel, who often passed by the school kitchen, stopped to observe the class. His gaze met Emily's, sharing a silent moment of understanding. In his hands were plants and documents for the newest project, expanding the culinary center to other parts of the city. "The aquifer is more protected than ever," he remarked, showing the sustainability reports, "and the water still adds that special touch to every dish." Nathan entered the kitchen accompanied by a group of journalists. The Family Flavors social program had caught the attention of international media, intrigued by how a traditional restaurant had transformed into a hub for social change. "And to think it all started with an accidental kiss at an airport," Claire teased, making Emily blush and the students laugh. Margaret, who now coordinated the project to recover traditional recipes, lovingly flipped through the old red book. Each page held not just recipes, but stories of families who had entrusted their culinary secrets to Family Flavors. "Look who came to visit," Nathan announced, making way for a familiar figure, Rose, carrying a basket of fresh herbs from her shop. "I brought a special gift," the Italian woman said, pulling out a small notebook. "I found more old recipes, including some from the Montgomery family I thought were lost." Emily took the notebook with reverence. The pages contained not just recipes, but little notes, secrets passed down through generations. On the first page was a recent photo, the graduation of the culinary school's first class, with Emily and Daniel at the center, surrounded by hopeful smiles. "You know what moves me the most?" Emily said, watching her students work, "seeing how everyone who passes through here takes a piece of our story and adds their own." Daniel hugged her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "And to think Sophia is helping too, even from afar." It was true. As part of her rehabilitation, Sophia had begun documenting old Montgomery family recipes, sending them to the restaurant's historical archive. It was her way of making amends, of reconnecting with her roots. The afternoon, sun streamed through the school kitchen windows, casting a golden glow. The aroma of freshly baked gnocchi blended with the scent of fresh basil and fulfilled promises. On the wall, an elegant phrase summed up the essence of the place. "Here, every flavor tells a story." Emily glanced at the ring on her finger. No longer just an heirloom, but a symbol of a future built on love and truth. Family Flavors had become exactly what its founders dreamed, a place where families come together, stories are preserved, and new chapters are written every day. "I think I finally understand," she said softly, as the students proudly presented their dishes. The real secret ingredient was never the aquifer's water. "No?" Daniel asked, his green eyes sparkling with curiosity. "No," Emily smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "It was love that turned every recipe into a story, every story into a lesson, and every lesson into a new beginning." And so, as the sun set, over Chicago, Family Flavors continued its mission, not just to feed bodies, but to nurture dreams, preserve memories, and prove that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't the ones we can keep, but the ones we choose to share. Dawn had yet to touch Chicago when Emily arrived at Family Flavors that special morning. It was the day of the Family Memorial's inauguration, a space dedicated to telling the story not only of the Montgomerys and the Thompsons, but of all the families who had contributed to the city's rich culinary tradition. At the center of the memorial, a specially designed fountain flowed with water from the aquifer, now protected by strict environmental laws. The gentle sound of water created an atmosphere of serenity in the space filled with photographs, documents, and historical artifacts. "I still can't believe we managed to gather so many memories," Margaret remarked, helping Emily arrange the final details of the exhibit. In her hands, she held an old apron that had belonged to her mother, now carefully restored and framed. Nathan entered the memorial carrying a mysterious box. "Look what Rose found during another one of her archaeological digs in the shop," he said, pulling out a set of old notebooks. "They're our grandfather's diaries." Emily took one of the notebooks with reverent care. The yellowed pages contained not just recipes, but deep reflections on life, love, and the importance of family. On one page, she found an entry that made her heart tighten. "A family's true legacy isn't measured in land or money, but in the stories we share, the meals we prepare together, the moments we turn simple ingredients into unforgettable memories." Daniel arrived shortly after, accompanied by a surprise Sophia on her first official visit after being granted parole. She looked different, more serene, more genuine. In her hands, she carried an old folder. "I found this in the company archives," she said softly. "These are the original blueprints of the restaurant, drawn by our grandparents together. They dreamed of a place that was more than just a restaurant. They wanted to create a gathering spot for families, a space where stories could be preserved and shared." Claire, who coordinated the memorial's tech features, had created an interactive system where visitors could explore the family's history through touchscreens. "Look," she demonstrated, "each recipe is connected to a story, each story to a family." The sun was just rising when the first guests arrived for the inauguration. Among them were culinary school students, longtime customers, journalists, and, to everyone's surprise, Judge Mendelsohn, now retired, who had helped uncover the truth. "You know," he remarked, gazing at an old photo of the restaurant, "I always knew there was something special about this place. It wasn't just the exceptional food, it was the love you could feel in every dish served." Emily led the guests on a guided tour of the memorial. Each section told part of the story: the friendship between the founding families, the discovery of the aquifer, the years of separation, and finally, the reunification that brought new purpose to the place. In a particularly emotional moment, Sophia paused before a photograph of Beatrice, her adoptive sister. "She always tried to show me that family is so much more than blood," she said, silent tears streaming down her face. "It took me too long to understand that." Daniel embraced his sister, a gesture of forgiveness and reconciliation that moved everyone present. Emily watched the scene while adjusting the ring on her finger, the same ring that had once been a symbol of unity decades ago and now represented a new beginning. At the center of the memorial, an old wooden table had been restored, the same one where the Montgomery and Thompson families had shared their first meals together. On it, old and new photographs mingled, telling a story of separation, redemption, and rebirth. "Do you have something special prepared for today?" Nathan asked Emily, noticing her thoughtful gaze. She smiled, a special sparkle in her eyes. "Actually, yes, I'm going to serve a recipe I found in Grandpa's journal, one he created to celebrate his friendship with Daniel's grandfather. He never got to make it. Until now," Daniel finished, taking her hand. The aroma beginning to fill the memorial was a symphony of memories and hope, a living testament that some stories just need the right moment to be told, and some flavors only reach their true essence when shared with love. Night had fallen over Chicago, but family flavors remained bright and full of life. After the inauguration of the family memorial, a special dinner brought together people who had been instrumental in reconnecting the Montgomery and Thompson families. In the main kitchen, Emily put the finishing touches on the dish she'd discovered in her grandfather's journal, a reinterpretation of traditional gnocchi that blended elements of Italian and American cuisine, symbolizing the union of the two families. "The aroma is divine," Margaret commented, helping her daughter with the preparations. Their hands worked in harmony, as if years of separation had never existed. "Your grandmother would be proud." Daniel walked into the kitchen carrying a special bottle of wine, one of the few that had survived in the basement of the old restaurant. "I found this treasure hidden behind a false wall," he explained. It's from the year our grandfathers first opened the restaurant. In the main hall, guests settled around a large U-shaped table. Nathan and Claire had decorated the space with old and new photographs, creating a visual timeline that told the family's story. Sophia, seated beside Judge Mendelssohn, looked more relaxed than ever. Rose, the Italian woman, had brought a special gift, an old bronze bell that used to hang at the entrance of the first family flavors. To call good fortune and ward off sorrow, she explained, her eyes shining with memories. When Emily emerged from the kitchen with the first dish, a murmur of admiration swept across the table. The gnocchi glowed with a golden sauce, garnished with fresh herbs and edible flowers that seemed to tell their own story. "Before we begin," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I'd like to share something with you." She signaled to Daniel, who stood and joined her. "Family Flavors isn't just a restaurant or a culinary center," Daniel began. "It's proof that true love, whether between families or between people, always finds its way home." Emily continued, "And that's why we chose this moment, surrounded by everyone who helped us rewrite this story, to announce that—" She gently touched her stomach, a radiant smile lighting up her face. "Our family will soon be growing." The news was met with emotional applause and tears of joy. Sophia was the first to stand and embrace the couple, whispering words of affection that finally seemed to come from the heart. Margaret and Nathan joined the hug, turning the moment into a celebration not just of a new life, but of all the lives, transformed by their journey of redemption and reconciliation. "A toast," Judge Mendelssohn proposed, raising his glass, "to the stories that brought us here and to the stories yet to come." The dinner unfolded like a symphony of flavors and emotions. Each dish served carried not just carefully selected ingredients, but also memories, hopes, and promises of a future built on foundations of love and truth. By the end of the night, as the last guests said their goodbyes, Emily and Daniel remained in the hall, swaying gently to the sound of an old Italian song that used to play in the restaurant decades ago. "You know," Emily murmured, resting her head on Daniel's shoulder, "I think I finally understand what our grandmother meant when she said, 'Some recipes only come together with time.'" Daniel smiled, spinning her softly. "And what's the secret?" "Love," she replied, gazing into the green eyes that had captured her heart that day at the airport. "Love is the ingredient that turns recipes into legacies, places into homes, and people into family." Outside, the city kept up its frantic pace, but inside Family Flavors, time seemed to flow to its own rhythm, a rhythm marked by the beating of united hearts, the aroma of dreams fulfilled, and the sweet taste of happiness finally found. Spring arrived in Chicago, bringing new scents to Family Flavors. 5 years had passed since the families reunited, and the restaurant school had become a symbol of social transformation in the city. That special morning, Emily watched her 4-year-old daughter Lauren playing in the herb garden on the building's rooftop terrace. "Mommy, look! The basil I planted is growing!" Lauren exclaimed, her green eyes identical to her father's, shining with excitement as she pointed at the tiny sprouts emerging from the soil. Emily smiled, remembering how she herself had learned about herbs and spices from her grandmother. Now it was her turn to pass that knowledge on. The circle of life continued, traditions renewing through generations. The sound of familiar footsteps caught her attention. Daniel was climbing the stairs to the terrace, carrying an old box. "Look what we've found during the East Wing expansion," he said, placing the box on a rustic wooden table. Inside were a set of never-sent letters written by Daniel's grandfather to Emily's grandfather during the years the families had been apart. Each envelope held not just words of longing and regret, but also recipes they had dreamed of creating together. "Daddy," Lauren ran to hug Daniel, her little hands smudged with dirt. "Is Aunt Sophia coming today?" "Yes, sweetheart," he replied, lifting her into his arms. "She's giving a special lesson to the new students at the school." Sophia had completely transformed after serving her sentence. Now she dedicated herself to teaching sustainable management and business ethics at Family Flavors Vocational Training Center. Her experience served as a powerful testament that change and redemption were possible. Nathan appeared on the terrace, accompanied by Claire, now his wife, and Margaret. "The new class is already arriving," he announced, "and they brought a surprise." The group went down to the main hall, where dozens of aspiring young chefs had gathered. Each carried a traditional dish from their family, creating a mosaic of aromas and stories that represented the city's cultural diversity. "This is the true spirit of family flavors," Emily said, moved. "It's not just about preserving our history, but about making space for other families to tell theirs." Margaret approached one of the tables, where an elderly woman was teaching her granddaughter how to make pastries using a century-old recipe. "Every recipe is a love story," she remarked, "and every story deserves to be preserved." The day unfolded with hands-on lessons, shared experiences, and countless stories. Sophia led her lecture with a humility that touched everyone present, especially when she spoke about how the power of forgiveness and love had transformed her life. As evening fell and the students began to say their goodbyes, Lauren tugged Emily's hand, leading her back to the herb garden. "Mommy, I want to make a new recipe," she declared with the seriousness only a 4-year-old can muster. "One that mixes all the stories we heard today." Emily exchanged a knowing glance with Daniel. Their daughter had inherited not just her father's green eyes, but also the dreamy spirit that had brought their families together so many years ago. "You know, Lauren," Emily began as they picked fresh basil together, "sometimes the best recipes are the ones we create when we mix love with memories." The sun set over Chicago's horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. On the terrace of family flavors, 3 generations of a family reunited by love shared far more than recipes. They shared dreams, hopes, and the certainty that some stories are meant to continue, growing and transforming like the herbs in the garden, yet always keeping their roots firmly planted in the fertile soil of love. The main dining room of Family Flavors was adorned with fresh flowers and soft lights that special evening. It was the 10th anniversary of the restaurant's reopening, and a unique celebration had been prepared. The tables were arranged in a circle, symbolizing the unity and continuity the place represented. Emily, now with silver strands woven into her dark hair, put the finishing touches on the special menu she had created for the occasion. Each dish told a part of the story, not just of the Montgomery and Thompson families, but of all the lives touched by family flavors over the years. "Mommy," Lauren, now 9 years old, ran toward her. "Grandma Rose brought another old recipe book, and there's a secret message inside." Rose, still spry despite her age, smiled mysteriously as she handed over a time-worn notebook. Between its pages, a photograph slipped out. It showed the first day of business at the original Family Flavors, with all the staff gathered in front of the restaurant. "Turn it over," Rose suggested, her eyes twinkling. On the back, a handwritten note read, "To future generations, may you never forget that the true flavor of life lies in the love we share. Grandma Mary and Joseph Montgomery." Daniel approached, carrying Lauren in his arms. Beside him, Claire, now a constant and beloved presence in her niece's life, smiled with genuine happiness. Nathan and Beatrice, expecting their first child, completed the family picture. 10 years, Margaret sighed, emotional. 10 years since the truths came to light and our families were reunited. The dining room began filling with special guests. Former culinary school students who were now renowned chefs, families who had shared their traditional recipes, people who had found in Family Flavors a place to start anew. "Before we serve dinner," Emily announced, her clear voice echoing through the room, "I'd like to share something with you." She gave a signal, and Lauren ran to the kitchen, returning with a covered dish. "This is a very special dish," Emily continued. "It was created by Lauren, using the secret recipe we found today, combined with her own interpretation of what family means." When the cover was lifted, it revealed a gnocchi unlike any other. Each piece had a unique color, creating a rainbow of flavors that represented the diversity of stories the restaurant had welcomed over the years. "Because family," Lauren explained with the surprising wisdom of a child, "is like a recipe. Every ingredient is different, but together they make something wonderful. Tears welled in everyone's eyes. Claire was the first to rise and hug her niece, followed by all the others. The moment perfectly captured the essence of what Family Flavors had become, a place where differences were celebrated, where stories were preserved, and where love remained the key ingredient. The dinner unfolded like a symphony of flavors and memories. Every dish served carried not just carefully selected ingredients, but also pieces of history passed down from generation to generation. As the night drew to a close, Emily stepped onto the small makeshift stage. Beside her, Daniel held her hand while Lauren, Nathan, Sophia, Claire, and Margaret formed a semicircle of support. 10 years ago, she began, an accidental kiss at an airport changed our lives forever. But the real change wasn't the kiss itself. It was the courage to believe that some stories deserve a different ending, that some recipes need time to reach their perfection, and that love, when true, always finds its way back home. The sound of the ancient bronze bell, now restored and hanging at the restaurant's entrance, echoed softly, as if approving her words. In the terrace garden, the basil planted by Lauren grew strong and lush, its leaves dancing in the night breeze. And so, Emily concluded, gazing at the smiling faces around her, our story continues, because the true flavor of love is eternal, passing from heart to heart, from table to table, from generation to generation. Family Flavors would continue its journey, not just as a restaurant or a school, but as a living testament that some stories have no end,